In this tutorial, we will use the Spring Initializer to generate a Spring Boot application template for us. This generated project will include all the various components that we have been using so far. For instance, Spring JDBC, MariaDB, Spring Web, and embedded Tomcat. This will all come pre-packaged for us in the generated Spring project. We will also add the TimeLeaf template engine, and then we will basically expand on our previous lecture, JDBC 11, and also JDBC 6, in order to create an application that will launch an embedded Tomcat web application that can read from our charity database and display the output in the view section of our TimeLeaf templates. For my YouTube students, this slideshow is part of a YouTube playlist. The playlist URL will be listed in the description and comments of this lesson. All source code for this playlist will be available for free in a GitHub repository. These are the high-level steps we will perform in this lesson. First, we will update the generated POM dependencies. Then we will add the model, DAO, and service layer from our previous tutorial, and we will adapt it to fit within the new Spring Boot paradigm with essentially Spring component annotations. In step number 4, we will add the landing page and the TimeLeaf template view. And then finally, we will create the charity controller and run it through the generated JDBC 12 Spring Boot application. And here we are in our Markdown document, and we'll see we'll start by creating the new module using the Spring Initializer. We will set up the package name and the packaging type, and we will add all the dependency types that we need in our generated Spring Boot application, and after which we will change the scope of the generated POM dependency. So over to IntelliJ. Let's have a look at our current Git branch. We are on the JDBC 12 start branch. So we'll create our new Spring Boot module. Change the group. Select Next. In Developer Tools, we will select Spring Boot DevTools. In Web, we will select Spring Web. In Template Engines, we will select TimeLeaf. In SQL, we will select JDBC and MariaDB and select Finish. We'll add the files to Git. And the only change we do here is we change the scope from runtime to default, because we are not going to launch it in an external Tomcat server. We are going to use an embedded Tomcat, so we will need JDBC with it. Now back to our Markdown document, and we've generated our Spring Boot app. We've updated the single POM dependency. And now we are going to run Maven clean install on our generated app. And according to our documents, it will show a missing data source bean. So we will have to create this bean and run it again. And we will use as inspiration the bean config file in our JDBC 6 tutorial. So back into IntelliJ. We'll select Maven, JDBC 12, and clean install. And we'll see that there are test failures. And we see essentially error creating bean with name data source. So in other words, we've set up, or we generated a Spring JDBC Spring Boot application, but it's still missing the data source. So at this stage, I am going to start cutting and pasting in from my preparation work. Paste in the config file. We've annotated it as a configuration file, and we've included the bean that specifies all the data source properties. So let's run Maven clean install again. And we see that our test succeeded. And if we look at our test, the only thing that it does, it loads the context. So now it actually found the data source bean that it's looking for. And now we're going to go back to our Markdown document and we look at step number 4. We are going to copy and adapt the following packages from our previous tutorial, JDBC 11, the model, the DAO, and the service layer. And then we are going to add a landing page and a Thymeleaf charities template page and our charity controller. So back in IntelliJ, and let's start with the DAO. Once again, I'll paste it in. And we see we're missing the charity model object, so let's paste in the model. So we have our RUD or create, read, update, and delete. We have our DAO implementation class, but we've done some adaptations like adding the component annotation, and we've auto-wired in the data source and set up a post-construct initializer. Other than that, all our logic is still the same as in the previous JDBC 11. Our model layer is exactly the same as we've used in our previous tutorial. So now let's add the service layer. And we see we've got the charity service interface and its implementation, where we've got the component annotations, we've got the charity DAO auto-wired, and a post-construct initializer, where the charity DAO is preloaded into our service implementation. All our other methods stays the same with the same transactional override. Now we'll copy over the controller. And if we look at the controller, we have auto-wired in the service layer. We've created a find charity mapping with the tax ID set up and finding the tax ID. For now, it's hard-coded. So let's have a look at what is in our database. We see that the charity is still in our database from our previous tutorial, which means in fact, if we run the Spring Boot application, it should launch the embedded Tomcat web app, and we should be able to find the charity. In order to serve up a landing page and a template that shows us the charity, we need to cut and paste in the index.html and the Thymeleaf template. So this is our landing page with a reference to the find charity that we have here in the charity controller. And so let's copy in the template. And this is the Thymeleaf template, and we see we have a for each going through all the charities and displaying the charities. Now if we go back to our charity controller, we will see that we will only display one. So let's go ahead and run Maven clean install. That looks good. We've got a successful build. So let's run the main Spring Boot application. And all of our Output looks good. It looks like we've launched the embedded Tomcat on localhost. Let's go over to a web browser. And here is our landing page. And now we click at the link to launch our controller. We show our charity list and a row of entries of our charity, which means we've basically now combined everything into a Spring Boot application, and we've done our first display of a find list. So this in essence ties everything together from all our previous tutorials and gives us a good base start for an overall Spring Boot web application. Now for self-study, you can try and change the logic here so that the value won't be hard-coded. It will actually be passed in on the charity. And other than that, this concludes this tutorial. I will see you in the next one.